Hello, what a year it's been for the world of technology. The ever-growing, ever-changing, multi-trillion-dollar mega-sector has continued to transform the way we work, play and communicate. But beneath the headlines, what are the top tech trends of 2024? And what might 2025 have in store? Well, let's go to New York now and speak to one man who's sure to be able to enlighten us. CEO and founder of Hyperframe Research, Stephen Dickens, joins us. Stephen, always good to see you. Let's start with AI. Everyone's been talking about it, as always, something that's been on the radar for years. But what's changed in 2024 to finally push companies towards this more full scale of production?
Hey Guy, thank you for having me on the show. Yes, as you say, AI's been with us for a while. Previous efforts around machine learning, we saw IBM with their competitions against grandmasters in chess. We saw the Jeopardy competition. So that Google buying DeepMind a few years back. So this is a sort of slowly and then all at once trend. I think what happened with the language models, ChatGPT came to us about 2 years ago. That broke into the public zeitgeist and really put this in the hands of consumers. Previously, machine learning and some of these AI models had been embedded in enterprises. They've been used in financial services. They've been used in the medical profession. They've been used in various places, but they hadn't broken through into the public. They hadn't become a consumer app that we could use on our phone and start to interact with. These multimodal models that we're seeing now from the likes of Gemini, from Google, ChatGPT, obviously, their collaboration with Microsoft, Anthropic. I could go on, search engines disrupting the market like Perplexity. I think what's happened in 2024 is we've now reached scale. We've now reached these enterprises starting to use these tools and get benefit from them.
And Steve, you talked about scaling AI there. What are the challenges that companies face when they try to do this? Because, it's been around, as you say, for a while now. The technology exists. Why aren't more companies, as you say, scaling this up, perhaps more quickly?
So there's a recent McKinsey study. They went out and surveyed 500 CIOs. And they looked about some of the adoption. I've got some of the numbers here, so I'm reading. 27% are early in their adoption, but seeing little to no quantified benefits. Only 9% are at scale with adoption and starting to see some small benefits. So it's still really, really early days. To go back to your question around some of the challenges, I think the challenges have been access to the technology. Obviously, NVIDIA has ridden this wave with huge demand for their GPUs. We heard about Elon Musk and Larry Ellison having to take Jensen Huang out to dinner to convince him to sell them GPUs so they could put them into Oracle, into XAI. So I think there's been an access to the technology kind of challenge. That's starting to go away. We're starting to see GPU as a service propositions come from the likes of HPE and Lenovo and Dell and Rackspace and others. So I think that trend's starting to change. We've also seen these tools start to be put into sort of more enterprise services. Big examples, Microsoft with their Copilot range. So I think that some of the challenges are going away, but we've got to recognize we're still so early in this mega trend. This is where mobile was in 2007 with the launch of the iPhone. This is where the internet was in 99, 2000. We're not late in the game yet. We are really early.
Early in the game, as you say, Steve. So are we starting to see some companies starting to get a return yet on this enormous investment they've been making?
So I think there's some really early use cases that are coming through. I think the first one that I see is code and developers. The ability to have code described to you, the ability to understand what's there, code description, code generation. We're seeing IBM do some really good work here with its Watson X range based on its Granite models. We're seeing a lot of other vendors. I track the mainframe space quite heavily, and we're even seeing it come through to some of those legacy platforms with things like COBOL. We're seeing code explanation. One of the biggest apps that Microsoft's seeing is its GitHub Copilot. Without getting into the details too much, that's assisting a developer just code more. When you think that developers only really code for an hour a day, that's not because they're lazy. They're putting in a 10-hour day. It's just that there's a lot of things around writing code that they have to do. If we can increase that productivity, that's going to be huge.
Yeah, interesting. Let's look now at another trend that you and your team have been identifying, the custom silicon revolution. What is it? What's the trend all about? And why is it that companies like Amazon and Google are not just talking about it, but investing so heavily in it?
Yeah, it's really interesting. If we wind back 10, 15 years, it was Intel. They've had a really tough year. Pat Gelsinger, their CEO, standing down. Then we've seen AMD come through. But if you look where we are now, Microsoft, Google, AWS, all investing in their own silicon. We're seeing Apple do this in consumer devices as well with their latest M4. This is people realizing, I don't want to go and get a generic chip from Intel or from AMD. What I want is a very specific chip or a processor designed for exactly what I want it to do in my architecture. So Google's just released its latest version of what it calls its TensorFlow processor unit, TPU, Trillium. And what that's doing is that's purely designed for the Gemini stack in their architecture. Same with AWS with their Bedrock and Q. They've got training chips, they've got inference chips. So we're also seeing open source movements like Sci5 and others. I think the key takeaway, though, for the listeners who aren't deep in this space is choice is good if you're looking to interact with these types of services. We've got big names like Intel, AMD, and NVIDIA. They will always be big names, but other choice is good for the consumer and good for enterprises.
Yeah, and talking of NVIDIA, that's a brand name that's rarely been out of the business headlines this year with its seemingly relentless market dominance. But you've indicated that there could be some serious challenges there for them on the horizon.
Yeah, so NVIDIA's probably got in the low 90% market share when it comes to AI GPUs right now. I think they're continuing to innovate at scale. Their latest Blackwell devices, they just launched a sort of more edge AI device this past week. So I don't see any challenges to NVIDIA's pace of innovation and their still market leadership position. I just think this is a rising tide lifts all boats, and there's going to, as the market total addressable market grows, there's going to be more players, and these other options around custom silicon that I mentioned will start to come through.
Now, moving data to the cloud is another one of these trends that's been seen for a few years now, and seems to have been viewed by some companies as the only tech strategy in town. But with the return of more on-premises infrastructure strategies, do you think that things there might be changing too?
Yeah, the simple takeaway that we're all wrestling with as an industry is, do I move the data to the AI, or do I move the AI to the data? And a lot of this data still sits within enterprises and still on-premise in their data centers. When I say in their data centers, they may be in co-location facilities with people like Equinix and Digital Realty. Might not be actually their physical building. But what we're seeing is lots of regulations, heavily regulated industries. Do I want to move that data to the cloud? Maybe I'm going to move some of it. Maybe I'm going to keep some of it on premises. So I think this is a case of holding two truths to be true at the same time. The cloud can be expanding. We're seeing 30% revenue growth and more, the hyperscale cloud providers. Oracle's growing faster than that. They were up over 50%. But then when you look at people like HPE, what used to be Hewlett Packard, they reported 33% growth in their AI server business this past quarter. So you can see both growing at the same time. Going back to what I was saying about a rising tide raising all boats.
And staying with this theme of a place for the practical, for the physical, the vast increase in data center power that we've seen, obviously that requires more and more methods to cool things down. Do you see this cooling issue as a crisis or an opportunity?
I think it's both. I think I went out to HPE's Investor Day where they took us around their factory and showed us that what they're doing with direct liquid cooling, fanless direct liquid cooling, let me get the acronym right. And basically what that's doing is pumping water or in some cases liquid glycol around these servers to cool them. GPUs put out a ridiculous amount of heat, and that's changing the architecture. It's also changing the power demands on the grid. All of the hyperscale cloud providers this year, that's Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, have announced collaborations with nuclear power companies for small modular reactors. So we're seeing not only the physical data center change and the architecture change, we're also seeing how that's powered and cooled. AI's changing every layer of the stack, software, hardware, tools, interfaces, and power at the bottom of that is being disrupted as well.
And finally, let me put you on the spot, Stephen. I know there's been a lot of detail discussed. You've been through a lot of trends there. If you had to pick just one trend that was going to dominate in 2025, what would it be?
I think it's going to be adoption of AI. As I say, we're still really, really early in that curve. I think those numbers that I mentioned earlier from that McKinsey study, if we were to run the same study at the end of 2025, we'll see a lot more adoption. We'll see a lot more adoption at scale, and we'll see a really proven ROI.
Stephen Dickens in New York for us. Thank you very much, as always, for joining us.